Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here as usual with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And we have our biggest Google Hangout ever here with 5 people because we have 2 guests on tonight. We're going to be talking to John P. Logsdon. He'll tell me how to pronounce that. And his co-writing buddy, Chris Young. They do comedic, fantasy, and fiction, and they co-author it together. So we're going to talk about in the first half probably the challenges of writing comedy and kind of collaborating and doing all that stuff together. And then we're going to get a bit into the marketing stuff because I'm pretty sure there's not actually a comedy, fantasy/comedy section on Amazon. So I'm sure there's some unique challenges for marketing. So hey guys, welcome to the show, and why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came together and how you guys started writing.
John, you want to take it? You want me to?
Sure. Yeah, so we basically we met back in 1989 at an Aikido class. We were both trying to get in shape. Clearly that didn't work. So we were taking Aikido together. We ended up hanging out after a couple of the sessions, and we started talking and found out that we both were into science fiction, and Chris didn't like fantasy. At the time, I didn't either, to be honest with you, until the whole Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings thing. But so we just started talking about stories and decided, hey, let's start writing. About 23 years later, we did. It took a little time, basically because we kept on trying to do serious stuff, and we realized that we just get like 10 pages in and find out that we really weren't very good at that, because it would always turn into comedy or something like that. So about 23 years later, we started writing comedy, started having some fun with it, and next thing you know, we've turned out I guess 11 books together, and I've also written additional books outside of that. But yeah, so that's basically how we got started. Plus, we worked together in the games industry for a long time, and we've just known each other forever.
All right.
We've been in the online thing since the beginning. Back when we worked for a company called Genie, that AOL was so small we used to laugh at them. We're like, oh, there'll never be anything. Oh well, we were wrong there.
And now I've been working for AOL for 16 years.
Nice. You guys, I had Genie. I used to run up my dad's phone bill because it was like $5 a minute or something back then. I don't know.
$6 an hour during the evenings, 18 during the day.
That's right.
I remember playing some online castle, like the first kind of online game, and my dad's like, dude, why do we have a $700 phone bill? What happened this month? I don't know, Dad.
Well, actually, we were contracted to code the front end of a couple of games for a big developer, which it turned out to be a company called Mythic Entertainment. But back then it was Aussie who did it, and we were going to be doing the front end for Diplomacy, and also we were talking about doing Squad Leader at the time. And I was the developer at the time. Chris was the designer. So that's how we really started flowing into all this stuff. And then when we ended up working, we worked at Interplay and their online branch off, which was Engage Games Online, and that's how I ended up transferring over to AOL. I was a product manager in the games division for I want to say 12 years, and then I moved back into development. So I've been doing development since then.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys know each other really well, so I'm sure that's helped. Why don't we jump into a little bit, jump into the writing kind of craft questions to start out with. I'd love to have you guys tell me like what's different about writing comedy, and what kind of challenges does it present, and do you think anybody can do it, or does it take kind of a special knack to write comedic anything?
Go ahead, Chris.
I'll start off and let John fill in some of the other parts. But for us, it's kind of how our conversations go. We always are bouncing off, trying to make each other laugh, and everything else. So that part came kind of naturally. But making it funny in the story, in the written word. To give you an example, there was a joke that we just laughed for 15 minutes, tears out our eyes. But then you put it in paper, and it was amusing. It's about all I managed to translate. So getting it out of us as far as what we think is funny and what we think will be funny is easy to some extent. But getting it to be funny still on paper and to fit into the story, that sometimes is a bit challenging. And a lot of that falls on John because he's got to try to word it so that you don't give away the joke. You don't explain the joke prior to the joke happening or the funny happening. But one of the favorite things we do when we write is to sit and obviously him being in North Carolina, is we basically Skype, and we'll Skype for 2 hours. We're basically just bouncing ideas, and then we'll go, that's great, but what about this, and add that, and so in that way we work fantastic as a team. One of the more challenging things was figuring out how to write, basically as two people, makes it a lot more difficult in a lot of ways as far as compromise. We've learned that over lesson. The process is something we've developed that works very well for us now, but I'll let John explain that. But the comedy part comes pretty easy.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like we spend so much time Skyping and going through things that my wife actually has come in here and put her wedding ring on my computer to kind of point it out. But what's fun about it is we kind of like the same type of humor. We like the whole Monty Python stuff, Airplane, those types of movies. We do go separate ways in some things. I like more of that uncomfortable humor of Meet the Parents. Chris isn't such a fan of that, but I think that if we can sit here and laugh about it and have a good time with it, next thing you know, you're just inspired. You just start grabbing stuff and saying, oh, let's put this here. And I mean, we'll come up with 5 story ideas in the course of 2 hours. And that's one of our biggest problems, because then we're going, well, now we've got another series. And every time we have a new idea, it's like, oh, wait, that could be this series. Or let's go to Magic. Wait, let's mix them both. We just go nuts. So we have to reel ourselves in a lot. But we have a lot of fun with it. And, writing it out, it really comes down to we had to find a way to work together, not just, through joking, because we can do that and never get anything done. But it was a case of our first 2 books were a nightmare to try to put together. Actually, the first book that we put together was Starliner, and I would arguably say that's probably our best book. But we kind of made a little bit of a mistake on this. We actually handed it over to the editorial department and said, give us a critique. Wow. Well, at that point, it was just like, so what else do you want to do for a living? Because this isn't going to be it. But we got that book back, and it was very disheartening, to see what came back from that. So we actually set that book aside for 2 years, and that's when I said, I got this fantasy book, this fantasy world. This was prior to my ever even knowing Terry Pratchett existed. I had no idea, and so I wrote this Holo Nonican thing, and I'm sitting here reading it, and somebody said, hey, you should check out Terry Pratchett. Just a friend of mine. He said, this is very similar. And I devoured every book from him after that, But so when I turned it over to Chris, he's like, wizards, magic, that's a bunch of crap. Every time anything happens with that, you could have an army of 1 million people and one wizard and you can wipe them out. I said, not in my world. And so I said, here's how it works. And that's where we started having fun with it. Your wizard only has power if he drinks, for example, or the other wizard has to stuff ostrich feces under his fingernails. I mean, stuff like this, there's only so much you can do. If you drink too much, you get so drunk you can't cast any spells anyway. So it was, how do we balance it without magic lines and all that? Next thing you know, he's like, okay, I'm in. So from there, we just started writing and writing, but it took us forever to write something where we could sit back and say, yeah, I like this. Finally, we found a pattern. And once we found that pattern, we were able to churn out books so much faster and also really get decent with the storylines and understand what we wanted to do with the characters, where it's not we're bleeding on the page. If Chris writes, he will bleed on the page. He'll struggle for an hour on one sentence.
I love it afterwards,
2,500 words and by then. Yeah. So, but yeah, so we just learned a pattern that worked for us, and I actually talked to a few other authors. I've co-authored with another person, not on comedy, but on something different. But and I kind of went through it with them, and he's been co-authoring with other people, and they've started adopting this. So I don't know if it'll work for everybody, but it certainly works for us. And essentially what it comes down to is I kind of took a few notes over here just so I could throw it out. First off, obviously having an idea, talking it through. Mull over it for a day or two, and then we get back together. And when we start talking about it, we say, okay, we have a story idea, we have the characters basically. Our outline comes in the form of do single paragraph chapters, just simple stuff, straight down. After that, again, we take another couple of days to go through it, come up with quips, ideas, laughs, whatever, and just jot notes. And then from there, that's where the real magic starts. We script it like we're writing a movie. Because if I take the time to write all the dialogue, well, here's what we found. I write the dialogue and all the description, everything else, we get 200 pages into it. Here, Chris, check out first draft. Oh, we got to rewrite this whole 100-page section. I'm like, no. So instead of that, we go through a script. And so when I give him the script and he has it, I have it, we pick characters, and that's when the fun begins because we start acting, and we're terrible at it. So we start choosing characters and voices, and we go through it and we act, and then that's the first draft for us. So we have it, we have the whole story, we can see it in our heads, and then it's like, okay, we're happy with it, we make our changes, and then from there it's a matter of me sitting down and actually writing the book. So by the time I'm done, that second draft, we have so few changes by the time we get to the third draft that it's great. I think Starliner took us 15 drafts to get through. And now our books are typically about 3 before I turn it over to an editor. So just doing the simple set it up, write a script, and then flesh out the whole story from there has been magic for us. It's been great.
Awesome. Well, I know Joe has some questions about the collaboration, and since you've already led us there, I'm going to hand you to him, but I did want to say you're the first guest that's used the term ostrich feces on our show, so I feel like you get bonus points or something.
I was going to warn you ahead of time. You know, you're interviewing 2 comedy guys, so sorry.
No problem. Go ahead, Joe.
All right. I'm probably going to swing back to comedy at the end of my little list of questions here. But you were talking about how you write collaboratively. So you spoke a lot about your process. What tools do you use? You mentioned Skype, but like how do you exchange the in progress writing?
So Dropbox is typically what we hook up with. I also have a script writing software over here. It's called Trelby, which is a freeware. It's open source. I was going to get Final Draft until I saw the price. So I said, there has to be something else I can use. So I grabbed Trelby, which is open source. It's great. It's very simple to use. I can use it, I'll use it on my laptop wherever I'm at, and it syncs with Dropbox. Chris can also grab that, or I can export out Final Draft, or I can export out as a PDF. So that's one. The second thing I use is Scrivener. That's what I use for all of my writing. He can also use it as well, obviously through Dropbox, so he can open and read right through and put all of his notes on the side. There, and then what's really nice is I happen to be married to an editor. That worked out. And my son is actually an editor also, again. And he's also a cover artist, so he does all of our cover art. So I'm kind of saving money on both fronts there. It's just pizza and room and board. But so we all use Dropbox collaboratively that way, and those are the primary tools that we do.
I use Dropbox too. I've not done very much collaborative writing, so I haven't used it for that. But I use it basically just so that if my computer explodes, my work so far has not been destroyed. All right. So you were saying like you trade off little thumbnail versions of everything, and then I guess you do, like John does most of the writing,
yes.
the final writing.
Writing-wise, when it comes down to the script writing. And also the actual laying out, writing the actual book or whatever. And then sometimes I'll insert sections or whatever. He'll make sure it fits into the voice, the proper voice. But yeah, he does the bulk of the actual writing. We collaborate on the story and really focus on that, get all that down in place. But he's by far the faster of the writers by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, where Chris comes in huge is, though, what I'm very bad at is research and also organization. So I'll be on book 4 writing stuff that has absolutely no sense to be in that book at all compared to what we did in book 1. And Chris will come back and say, well, you can't do that. Ships, unfortunately, cannot go 14 times the speed of light in this world. I don't know where you came up with that idea, but I'm like, because it's cool. So he stops me a lot of time. Frankly, if it weren't for him, my books would be really crazy. So.
Well, it's handy. It's handy to have complementing strengths.
Very much so. Yeah, it's what's really made it work for us is the fact that where he's strong, I might be some, but not nearly as strong, and where he's has a little issues with consistency, because I'm a dog for that. I just can't stand it. TV shows or books or wherever it may be, if they break their own rules in their own world, just drives me nuts. or get out of character, things like that. So yeah, it really has been a benefit in that sense that we complement each other extremely.
Yeah. So and since like the final draft is done by one person, one of my concerns with collaborative writing, it seems that would take care of, is that you might end up with, like, again, unless you have a very similar voice when writing, you'd have a very choppy output unless somebody unified it. It's something that I tripped over a little bit when I tried to collaborate. So like having the final pen put to paper by one person seems like it would fix that up pretty well.
It's actually, it does help a lot, but just as a segue to another author that I've worked with, we did a story that is not comedy. Actually, my character was a psychopathic killer, which unfortunately I become the character. So anyway, I'm on my second marriage, but no, I'm kidding. But it actually worked out because he told his perspective from first person. I told mine from third person. His characters were literally the focal point characters on their side, and my guy was the wacko on this side. And eventually, they ended up, coming together. Now, when they did, I agree with you. That's where we ran into trouble. So what I basically told him to do is I said, "Look, you write it, and then I'm going to come in and I will change my guy to actually be my guy." And it worked out for us, but it was an interesting experience. And we are looking at doing more books in that way, but it was definitely a lot more challenging.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the concept of a story collaboratively written that's supposed to have two different voices in it. Like, it's kind of a clever idea, and certainly a very good application for collaborative writing.
I told him the same thing when he told me what he was doing. I thought, that's unique because you do have to have the same voice. You really do. Even some of the big authors like Larry Niven and Jerry Cornell and them, when they wrote together, they only had one person writing the book. They kept the one voice. Otherwise, it does get disastrous. You can't mix the two.
Yeah, I read Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, and there's a giant section, at least in the edition I had, a giant section about what it was like to write collaboratively, and they were like, they sort of lost track of who wrote what, and it became this weird big mush of the two of them. So I'm like, you probably need to be a pretty high-class author to make that work. And it's good to know that there are like multiple ways to make collaboration work. So I'm going to swing back now into a question about comedy before I hand off to Jeff. Comedy has a tendency to step on people's toes, and there are some people who are completely humorless about everything. Do you think it pays to tread lightly with humor, or do you go for the joke and damn the consequences?
I'll start with this one, and then John can finish. We struggled with that one immensely, especially when we started writing another series called Platoon F, because our first books have humor in them, but a much more subtle humor, and there's more story and character based with a good story. When he wrote the first book of Platoon F, I initially didn't get involved, and then I thought, oh, I like this. But we even went as far as actually putting a pen name on it initially. And some of the reviews were very polarized. They loved it, they hated it. And then basically we decided, this is our writing just like our other writing, so we changed it and put our names on it. We found that, that John elaborated on this, but when we expanded and put in there, pointed out on Amazon, for instance, hilarious, funny, everything else, we did kind of avoid a lot of the people who just weren't, as you pointed out, humorless. They just weren't looking for it. But there were some people who put reviews up who just didn't get any of it and didn't like it, just hated it. But that's something to deal with in writing. You deal with some of the people, and what really makes, at least I think John and myself, happy is when we find people who do love it. It's nothing better than a reviewer who goes to the time to review your book for you and is actually dead on. He gets exactly what you were trying to accomplish, what the message was, and things like that. So it really works for us. To do the comedy and just know that the people who love it, that's who we're writing for, And the other ones, well, you can't please everybody all the time.
No. Yeah, we actually got a number of very, very negative reviews at first. It was interesting. It was like there was a time where we got no 3, 2, or 4 stars. It was 5 or 1, period, and that's it. And all of the 1 stars, man, they hated us. I mean, it was bad. And all of the 5 stars, they loved us. And I was like, wow, cool. But at that point, I was Connor London. I was not me. So I was replying. Probably not the best idea, but I was doing it in a way that, you know, I was trying to be respectful. I was trying to, you know, come across that way. And it's very interesting because I had a dialogue, which you can actually see on the Platoon F, the SSMC Reluctant book, which was the first one in that series, where I went back and forth with this particular gentleman. And eventually, I actually saw that he had a website, so I went and looked at his website, and he made pens, and he and I ended up conversing back and forth in private email for quite a while, and he ended up actually sending me a pen that he made. Now, this is a guy that when he first started out saying that he thought I must be on drugs to have written a book like that. So, and now he's sending me pens. So I was like, cool. But anyway, he's a really nice guy. What happened was I asked him, I said, well, do you watch shows like Futurama, South Park, you know, Family Guy? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He says, I'm like a week away from retirement. Ah. There you go.
You are not the target audience.
Exactly. And that's when I realized it was like, okay, wait a minute here. I was marketing this book as science fiction, which it is, sort of, but it's comedic science fiction. So if you're picking it up, and this guy was an engineer, I mean, he actually makes his own planes and flies them and stuff. He's looking something that's going to be meaty, you know, Gregory Benford type stuff, right? And he's picking up and seeing, you know, what I've put together is pure comedy. I mean, slapstick airplane type humor. And so from his perspective, he's like, what's this? But it was actually really good because he was the one that suggested, hey, just put a tagline on that says from the hilarious Platoon F series or something. I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Ever since doing that, haven't had any one-star reviews. Had a 2-star review or two, but not any 1-star. But we've gotten better reviews from that, and it's really worked out. But Chris is right. You just can't please everybody. You guys know that anyway. But when it comes to comedy, I think a lot of comedians say if you don't expect, sorry for the language, but if you don't expect to piss people off, you shouldn't be in comedy. I mean, because no matter what, you have to make fun of stuff. I mean, that's what you do. And some people, you're going to be ending up making fun of them. Now, we always try to do it in such a way that it's not hateful. We're not trying to bash anybody or anything else. And a lot of times we actually try to pull across a message with that humor, you know, with what we're doing. But, you know, we're just careful about it. But even robots, you know, we try not to do it because, hey, you never know. 100 years from now, we don't want them hating us. So.
Yeah, really reading a book and going, look those guys up. Well, it won't be around then, but.
All right, well, that does it for my list, so we're going to go on to Jeff now.
Okay, you two, I've got a question for you. You obviously know each other well enough to do a collaboration and then write books together. Do you feel collaborative works have a distinct advantage over titles written by a single author?
I'll take that one. Yeah, for it, with a caveat. Yes. But as with John and I, you have to have two strengths. I don't know if two really strong writers would do well because one's probably not going to want to, you know, have the voice be entirely in one of the other writer's books. Like I said, John and the other author he worked with came up with a very creative way to try to get around that. But in general, at least, like, and Joseph mentioned that they actually, Terry Pratchett and the other one actually wrote sections. But all the ones I read when I was growing up, they all pointed out that they basically picked one voice to go with, whoever the voice may be it Larry Niven or Jerry Pournelle, and other books too. So if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to say, okay, you're the stronger writer, you know, I'll work more on the consistency, and we'll work together, you know, the consistency, the story, and things like that, and we'll work together on all the rest as far as coming up with it. But then, you know, I think it's actually quite a benefit because you get, you know, two minds are better than one kind of theory, and you end up with, you know, something like, say, that happens all the time with John and I. It's like I'll say, here's my idea, and he'll go, that's really hilarious, but what if we did this along the way, or what if we did this right after that? And we'll go a different direction than I would have gone with it. And I think the overall, basically, you know, the completed work becomes better because of it. Almost, you know, always becomes better because of it.
Yeah, I would almost, I would agree to a point. I would say that comedically speaking, I think it helps a lot because, as you guys know, whenever you're like in a room and there's somebody who's, you know, throwing jokes back and forth, it's much easier if you have somebody to bounce those types of ideas off of because they'll try to one-up you or so on. But I found that when I was writing the more serious stuff, it's it's great to bounce ideas off of and to come up with different things like that. But putting my head down to actually write and so on, I have to get into a different place. I have to get into that character's mindset. And when I tell you about one of our books that we're about to release, it's going to sound really bad. But anyway, I have to get into a character's mindset. But for that to work, yet with comedy, I find that it's actually a lot harder for me to write that by myself. So having Chris to bounce ideas off back and forth, I mean, that's priceless as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so I just thought of a semi-sort of related question for the two of you. Have you ever, when writing comedy, deliberately tried to write something to make the other person go, dude, what the hell?
Oh, yeah, all the time on his side. But having said that, I've probably done it a couple of times too, where we go, John had pointed out before that we don't want to, bash anybody. And in fact, most of our books have a message in the long run, in the end, saying, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Be who you want to be, kind of thing. So overall, actually, our message is always a very positive one in most cases. But we do put quite a bit of time and thought to going, do we want to do that? Or are we going to hurt somebody's feelings in a wrong way or a bad way? Or is that just too over the top? One of the reasons we decided to go with the Platoon F, and initially John with the, John Connor, was because it was kind of really over the top in some places. But we decided in the long run, hey, it's still us. It's still writing, our writing and our stories and our comedy, and so we put our names back on it.
Yeah, I actually wrote Platoon F by myself. Chris was not a fan of the idea at first. So the very first book of that, I just said, look, I'm just going to do this. So what I did was I did a little marketing side here. I went and did a little research, and I said, okay, science fiction, what is needed? And so I looked, and I found Space Marines. They didn't have a whole lot of books there. Actually, a friend of mine had written a Space Marine book, and his was taking off, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to write a Space Marine book about comedy. And it became our #1 bestseller. But what happened is while I was doing that, the whole time I was going, he's not as interested in writing this book, so I'm going to write it, and I'm going to make him laugh. And I just went through, and I just kept on doing it. I'm like, okay. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, okay, we're having a conversation. So he was still there, just he didn't know it. And so I was sitting here doing this whole thing, and eventually I turned it over to him. I put the book out, and it was like 1 sale, 2 sales, no sales, and then 500 sales. And I'm like, what happened? And then 1,000 sales. I'm like, this is crazy. And then all of a sudden, Chris seemed to like the idea.
I like it, in all fairness, before the sales. But especially when initially he said we're going to do it as under a pen name. It's like, okay.
Okay, so based on all the years of experience you guys have working with a writing partner, back when you first started writing together, if you knew then what you know now, would you actually do it again, working with a partner?
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. For me, as we pointed out, John is the voice. I insert a little bit of pieces here and there, but even then he has to take it and kind of rewrite it slightly to make sure that it fits in, to the voice, his voice. I'm a storyteller. Have been since I was a kid. They've run through my head, the characters, whole plot lines, whole movies for that matter. But as John pointed out, writing for me is a struggle because I can't help but try to be a perfectionist. Not maybe one sentence, but I'll write a paragraph literally in a day. I like that paragraph a lot at the end of the day, but it's a paragraph. And for me, that's not an enjoyable experience. What John and I do now, especially since we've got the script and everything else and the way we do it, is a very enjoyable experience. It's something that I love to do and stuff like that. Me trying to write, I'm happy with my work when it's done, but it's not enjoyable, so it's hard to do. So yeah, I would do it in a heartbeat. In fact, I'd do it a lot sooner. I would have done it a couple of years after we met in Aikido instead of 20-some years later.
Yeah.
Do you think it takes authors with special skill sets or personalities to be able to successfully write a book with another person, or do you think any two people can do it?
No, I definitely think you have to have that rapport. I think that for example, I was going to write a book with another author, and it turned out to be a nightmare. It never went anywhere. We didn't get on with it because we didn't really have that rapport. It was more a case of, hey, I like what you write, you like what I write. Let's go ahead and collaborate and try something. and we didn't know each other, so we were trying to build that relationship and so on. I think it's a very, I mean, even comedy, it's a very intimate thing. So if you sit down to just start writing, you're basically, you're pouring, as you guys know, you're pouring your soul out, and so when you get those negative reviews, it hurts. But the fact is that while you're working with somebody, you have to be able to take that criticism, real time. You have to be able to say, hey, you know what, that idea is just not going to fly. Now, fortunately, not only have we been writing together for quite a while, but we worked together for quite a while. So we've had to go through the process of designing games, and then smashing each other's games, and then coming back and making changes and everything else. So we've learned that along the way. The other two authors that I have successfully written with, we also knew each other really well. But yeah, I personally feel that you really have to have a strong rapport in order for that to work.
Because no matter what or how hard, even if you're trying, you're going to step on each other. You're going to get, well, I think it should go this way. No, I think it should go this way. And you get kind of in that corner, and neither one wants to budge. Usually the way John and I handle that is we just don't talk to each other for several days. Then we come back. We kind of, it's not quite so close to us, because I mean, as an author, you get very attached to the idea. So it's hard sometimes to say, well, okay, I'm going to let's do your idea. Let's see how that works. And then usually in the long run, it always works out. But it can be very challenging. The way we end to do it now, though, and especially with the comedies, they're just outright, Mighty Python, those kind of things. Those just kind of roll off of us. The other ones, the ones that are more subtle, like Starliner, which is actually a murder mystery in sci-fi with robots. That one was a lot more difficult, because the humor there was much more subtle and wasn't really the focus of the book. So we bump heads all the time. But having known each other for so many years, worked together for so many years, we could get over it. People who aren't that, got that rapport may not. They may end up not being friends as they were in the beginning.
Yeah, and recognizing the fact that, Chris realizes it would take him 60 years to write a single book.
That's right.
I get to
people say, here's my book, spent 10 years.
And speaking of speed on which you write books there, you touched on briefly about how you said you developed this trick to actually write books a lot faster. How long did it take you to come up with, to essentially finalize your writing technique so you can actually readily release these books?
I think it was around book 7 that we did that. So we actually ended up writing 3 Platoon F stories in 3 weeks.
They're short, 100 each, but still.
Yeah, and they're novellas more than full-length books. That's what we were going for, because we wanted them to be very episodic type worlds. So they run between those 3 books run between, I think, like 22,000 and 30,000 words, something like that. But what it really came down to is learning how to do the scripting. And once we figured that out, we were able to write much more quickly. And then the best part about comedy is when we can act it out, because you've got your character, I've got mine, you've got your character list, and then we're sitting here going back and forth and trying to do the voices and just being so bad at it. I mean, we're not even B-movie level. We're so bad.
Do you record yourselves doing it so you can use it as reference later?
We don't. We should. Yeah, we should. And then just give it to our newsletter subscribers, and then that way they can unsubscribe. But so yeah, that's a good idea.
On our latest project, which John will mention in a while, he has to pick an accent that I can't do any of that. And even if I can, it's very brief, so it comes and it goes. So I was like, okay, no more of those.
All right. Well, heading up to the marketing questions, I'm going to pass you guys back over to Lindsay. So, Lindsay, take it away.
All right. Well, I would love to, kind of going off what you guys were just talking about, I'd love to know, I think, John, in an email to me, you said that sort of like your best sales tool is basically writing more books. Do you want to explain kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so we tried a whole bunch of different things. We were doing giveaways. We were doing, in the back of the book, which is obviously important. It had to do all that kind of stuff too to lead you to the next book and so on. But what I found is that, well, first off, it seems to me that I get better rankings when I release a book at least once every couple of months. I've noticed that. The second thing is that if a person has already picked up one of the books, if I only had one, they're going to forget me. I mean, we don't have the 15 minutes of fame anymore. It's like 5 seconds now, or 15 seconds in this day and age. I'm also a musician, so I go through, I release music, and I learned the hard way that way as well. If you only have one thing, if somebody likes it, that's great, but they forgot you, 2 weeks from now. So the idea was, if I release more books, and if a person ties into that first book, they might grab the second one, then they might grab the third one, and so on. And that's exactly what I found. Most of the people who sign up for the newsletter, they are, they've picked up the first book and they've gone, oh, I get a free book if I go to sign up to your newsletter. And then next thing you know, they're buying my other books, and then I'm getting emails from them saying, hey, I read this one. Are you guys doing more Platoon F? What's going on, et cetera, et cetera. And you can kind of see it as a one-to-one, because as you know, looking at your sales on KDP, you can kind of see a person has bought this. Next thing you know, they bought all of these, and it's not likely that that's all different people because of the way it happens. So you kind of pick that up. But I've definitely noticed a bump in all sales ever since. The more books I have, the more books I start selling.
All right, definitely good advice, and I've definitely noticed the same thing. If you can release something every couple of months, it really seems to kind of keep you up there fresh, and the Amazon algorithm's helping you out.
Yep.
I was wondering earlier, you guys were kind of talking about going into like the space marine category, which I love science fiction because there are so many, really kind of small niche subcategories. With comedy, I was saying earlier, I don't think there's actually a comedy category under sci-fi or fantasy, which is unfortunate. Do you feel that the best, like what do you do to, you kind of talked about, to warn somebody that, hey, this is comedy, it's not like a serious, alien invasion or space marine, space opera kind of thing? Should somebody put a warning with the cover or the blurb or what?
Well, initially we thought putting John, on some of them, like 2-3 chapters as a preview. If you read the first 2 or 3 chapters, you kind of get the idea, but we didn't find that to actually be that true. So when John added the more of the captions, hilarious, sci-fi, things like that, that really did, as he pointed out, got to the point where the people who came to that page went, I'm not interested in that, and they left. And the people who did buy the book either gave us very pointed criticism, of why they didn't care for it. Again, it can't please everybody, or they loved it. They really did, help to kind of narrow our audience and get the right people in there who really did want to buy the book and read the book.
Yeah, plus the keywords. First off, I tried a whole bunch of different categories. I tried, science fiction, military. I tried just humor. But you're right. There is no comedic sci-fi. There's no comedic fantasy. So mixing those two was really weird. And actually, I was on the Platoon F was under number 2, actually number 1 in humor, which was really weird because it was in front of Chelsea Lately, and I was just like, I'm awesome. And then I wasn't very awesome for long. But she won anyhow. But yeah, but the keywords were great in there, and then I just started putting in, keywords like comedy, humor, and then in the description I was just very clear about it. The other thing I think is important that I kind of learned along the way is that kids like sci-fi. These are not kids' books. It's things like Ononakin, that's fine for kids, but things and Starliner, that's okay. But things like Platoon F, I don't think that's, it's up to the parent at that point. But I want to make sure the parent's aware that this is not something that little Johnny should be reading. So I definitely put in the author's note, this is not intended for kids throughout that. But the same thing with just the comedy, just saying, hey, look. Yes, I sold a lot of books to a lot of people who probably didn't expect this to be comedic. They probably like the cover, and books do sell by the covers, and that's when I started realizing, hey, I should say something here, because I didn't think about it. I figured you're going to read the first 20, like Chris said, 20, 30 pages. If you don't get that this is comedy, I don't see how. So.
All right. Well, I see that you guys are in Kindle Unlimited right now. I was wondering if you've played around with the perma-free at all to just try to get as many people to try that first book as possible, or what are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely did. Platoon F, the first one, the SSMC Reluctant, I actually had perma-free, and then I for some reason, I had gone into Smashwords and had taken off a lot of my books, and I accidentally deleted that one. Next thing you know, about a month later, I'm going, hey, it's not free anymore. What's going on? And then I made an even dumber mistake. I went into the actual book to see what was going on, and I signed myself up for the Select again with it. I'm like, what'd you do that for? So I'm waiting for that to expire. Then I'm going to put it back to perma-free. I really wish that Amazon just allowed you to do that. It just seems so dumb the way you have to go about it. But anyhow, so yes, I do believe highly in the perma-free. When we released what we called our pentology, which is the first 5 missions of Platoon F, I said at that point, let's release this first book for free. You know, it's sold like crazy, and then it started, you know, not tanking, but it started going down. And so once we did that, we were giving away tons of them, and then we were also selling a lot of pentologies from doing that. So we definitely have seen a sales decrease ever since that. I tried to get them to, you know, release the Select on it, and they wouldn't do it. So I'm just waiting, and then I will put it back to free again.
Yeah, Amazon wants to make it very easy for you to accidentally sign up for Select or not to opt out. They don't like warn you when your quarter's coming to an end or anything.
Yep. It's bad as Adobe Flash with Google Toolbar. Yeah, forget that checkbox. Google Toolbar.
All right. Well, actually, Jeff had a little comment over here on the side. He was saying that you can go to shelfari.com with your titles, and there's a section that you can put in Kindle's book extras, and that maybe could be a place where you could add parental notes, you know.
Oh, cool.
Mature audiences only kind of thing.
Cool. Or at least teenagers.
Yeah. People with a sense of humor. No.
People old enough to get the jokes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I'd like to ask you a couple of social media kind of questions before handing it back to the guys. How active are you guys on the social media sites, and are there any ones that you're particularly fond of?
Chris hates social media.
Yeah, really. Funny enough, I was around during the beginning of it with Jeannie, and I just kind of like, but we both did it for a little while, and we were trying, you know, the route initially to, you know, get as many followers as we could to us, you know, and send out the messages and stuff. And then John, thank goodness, being a programmer again, where our skill sets, you know, complement each other, he came up with a much better method for what he's doing now, and this works a lot better for us. I'll let him explain since he wrote it.
So you guys are probably familiar with Hootsuite and all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to pay for it, so I wrote my own. And basically, I have a site called Crimson Myth, which is basically all the people who I've written with or we've worked together for a long time, and they're all writing and so on. And so I coded up something so they wouldn't have to deal with Hootsuite or any of that stuff, and we could just, you know, all piggyback on this thing. So we write our own tweets there, and it goes out, and it does, you know, we can say every 6 hours send a tweet for me, whether it be through your channel, my channel, or whatever. It'll automatically do the tweets for us. So we just have to, you know, craft about 20 to 30 tweets for each book that we release, put them into the database, and then from there it takes care of it for us. But really, the important thing that I've learned from Twitter or about Twitter, in order to and I've seen a direct correlation to sales on this, is how you set your tweets up. I did a lot of studying to see what successful authors seem to be doing and how they were doing it, and I also had to take a class for work, a couple of classes for work on marketing with Twitter and stuff like that. So they taught us a lot of interesting things. But for authors specifically, what I learned is you essentially keep your tweet short as you can, followed by obviously a URL. But the URL you want to use either BookLinker or GeoRiot. I personally use BookLinker, even though GeoRiot has recently purchased them. The idea, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but the idea there is simply when a person clicks on that link, it checks to see where they are in the world. So it sends a UK person to Amazon UK, not Amazon US. It'll send somebody from Australia to theirs, and so on. Canada goes to theirs. So that way, I'm not sending everybody to the US, because, you know, then they're going to have to navigate, and it's just more of a pain for them. I don't want that barrier to entry for a reader. So using BookLinker, it also is kind of like Bitly. I can customize it, so it'll say get book at, which is awesome, and then or something like that, and then / platoon F. I can do something to that effect, which is great. And the third thing that I learned is hashtags. You can spend weeks and weeks trying to build your customer base, but the majority, or I'm sorry, your followers, but the majority of your followers are going to be other authors. You know that. Because they're trying to piggyback on you and get more and more people. So I mean, I definitely do read a lot of books from authors that happen to tweet stuff that looks cool to me, but at the same time, I'm not going to be probably their biggest buyer, nor they're going to be mine. We want to get readers, and one of the ways that I figured to learn how to do that is what you tweet to. So yes, the people who obviously follow you are going to see your tweets, but it's more important those hashtags. Because every time you tweet to a hashtag, it goes there. Now, unfortunately, Twitter currently has it set to go trending data as opposed to all data. So this is where other authors come in, which is great, is that they retweet your stuff, you become trending, you end up on the trending list, or they favorite it, and so on. So always want to make sure that you're doing that for fellow authors, especially folks who are treating you nice, treat them back nicely, because everybody's scratching everybody's back. We're all independent. We're all trying to make it. So help each other out there. But it also helps you to get trending. But here's the biggest thing. On those hashtags, that's your option. That's your ability to create a second sentence. So don't just put them in willy-nilly. Don't just say like, Amazon, LOL, Kindle, funny. That makes no sense. Don't do that. Instead, say something like, comedy, sci-fi, Amazon, Kindle. So that way they know, okay, it's comedy, it's a sci-fi book, it's on Amazon, and I can get it from my Kindle device, or giveaway, or whatever. Make it a sentence. So then you have your tweet, which is a sentence, your URL, which separates them, and then another hashtag sentence. And I have found that when those go out, I see a direct correlation to sales on that. Probably about 20% to 25% of sales come from that.
All right, great. I hadn't heard of that book linker site before, so I'll definitely check that out. That seems like a really great idea because it is such a global world out there, and definitely I have readers from all over the country. So,
yeah.
I'm curious with the hashtags. Have you looked at any of those sites that kind of tell you which ones are actually popular and that people are using?
Hashtagifier.me is the one. Hashtagify.me is what I use primarily. Yeah, and once you build a list. I mean, I have a list of like 50 of them. You can write the same tweet and just change your tags. So that way you have like, going out to 3 different tags. And since it goes out like, if I have I think I have like 180 different tweets right now, and one is being sent every 6 hours. That's going to be a long time before I repeat. And they're all randomized, so it just grabs them randomly and throws them out there. So it's going to be a long time before I repeat. But yes, I use Hashtagify to build all that. And as we're going to be doing some non-specific comedy, so it's more, if you guys are familiar, like Firefly, it's more of that type of thing where there's comedic relief throughout and so on. But that's going to have a whole new suite of tags to go with that. That's not really going to fit with like the Platoon F crowd. So we'll have to use Hashtagify again for that.
All right, great tips. I'm scribbling these down over here, also known as typing, so I can put them in the show notes so that people can check there if they want to get the links.
Cool.
And yeah, we're definitely down with Firefly around here. So, all right, I'm gonna.
What the hell are they thinking?
I know. I watched my.
Popular.
Yeah, I watched my 15 episodes, and I'm like, oh, maybe they'll do another season someday.
Every year I watch them, just go through them again. 15. Wait a minute. You got to the movies one? I thought it was like 14.
Is it 14? I know there's the 3 that never aired. So. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's including the 14. But then he counts Serenity because it was kind of in a way just a long episode.
Right.
Yeah. 14 years later or whatever it is, and they're still popular at Comic-Con and stuff like that. Yeah.
I know. It's a sad thing. They probably didn't use Twitter correctly.
There you go.
All right, I'm going to hand you over to Joe and Jeff to...
or AOL or...
All right, take over, Joe, and ask a few more questions for them.
Alrighty. We're getting toward the end of the hour, and a lot of the key points of my stuff has sort of been gone over, so I'm going to just sort of breeze through a little bit. First off, when you are marketing a collaborative novel, do you market as a unit, or do you split up the tasks?
I do it. Primarily, we talk about, what do we want to hit and so on and how we want to approach things. We come up with ideas together, but it's typically me. I essentially have, you could probably tell from the way I speak so fast, but I have ADD, so I basically just go nuts. I've got 3 monitors here, and I'm currently in the process of moving. I'm moving next week, but I've got 3 more monitors that go up top here. So I've got 6 monitors, and I can never sit still, so I handle it.
All right, then. So it's split by just 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, for another reason also is that, again, I think just mentioning complementary skill sets. He's working in AOL. He's a lot more involved and close to that, environment, and basically knows a little bit more about, what might work better. I'm in IT, and I can help you with your computer, or get into, but it doesn't really translate into marketing skills per se.
Yep, it's another good reason to have collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So you've mentioned that it's hard to find a category that's appropriate for comedic books that are still genre fiction. Do you think there are any marketing assets to having comedy?
John?
Rephrase the question?
Basically, does comedy give you any avenues for marketing that other books that aren't comedic don't have?
Oh, that's a great question. Boy, you stumped me. Yeah, I would imagine yes. I just haven't found them.
Yeah, so overall,
I can think of one that works for you and works against you. There aren't a lot of competition.
That's true.
It's true.
But, as Lily pointed out, there's not a lot of places to be able to put it effectively to get the message out there without having literally large marketing dollars. I mean, of course, if we had money, we could advertise. And I think then it would definitely play in, because Terry Pratchett, Harry Harrison to some degree with Bill Galactic Hero, also Stephen Silrack, they're there, mid-adventures, but they've been far few between in the over the years. So you have that niche, and that's initially in a way what we thought too is like we enjoy it. It's definitely a niche, but if we can kind of take that niche and make it our own. But the marketing part has been a struggle because it's just not a lot of unique places you can put it to really get it out there without having serious marketing dollars behind it.
And actually, on that note, you touched on something really important there, and that is that our subscribers very loyal, which is really cool because it is hard to find. So it's probably more challenging for us to get subscribers than maybe more mainstream authors, but I'd rather have a couple of hundred diehard comedic fans than people who really aren't sure what is this, and then they buy it and then they feel gypped or whatever because they didn't know what they were getting into. But these folks that we have that subscribe to us are like, hey, when's the next thing coming out? We're looking forward to it. We get a lot of emails about that. So there isn't a lot there. So it is an excellent point.
Yeah, I know from experience that it's a little bit there's not a lot of competition in those categories because I have one book that was classified as satire, and I think I sold 8 copies and hit #1 on the satire list. So
yeah,
at least you can have some nice impressive ranks. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the coolest thing though for us on that was that we actually hit and held #2 spot in UK for Space Marines. And actually, in science fiction, I think we were in the top 20, and we were definitely in the top 10 in the U.S. for, I think about 2 months, 3 months, in just science fiction. I think Space Marines again there, which was great because, yeah, exactly, did. Which was great, but it was also because it was science fiction, and a lot of people gravitated towards that side of it, I think, more than the comedic side of it.
All right. I think that really sort of covers what I had, so I'm gonna pitch to Jeff for the last few questions.
Okay, let's see here. All right, you guys have talked a lot about marketing, but have you guys really used any place to create any ads, like say Facebook or like BookBub or anything like that?
Yeah, used Facebook definitely. Have tried that a few times. I haven't really noticed a lot of turnover from that. Goodreads, however, I did get pretty decent. Actually, it was interesting with Goodreads. I just sent them $50 and said, "Let's see what happens." And I ended up putting up ads on all the books. That was probably one of the most effective things I've done, simply because everybody who clicked it, I would argue I got a high turnaround of purchases from that. Unfortunately, I started the ad campaign in November, and it just finished like a week ago. That's how few clicks I actually got. But every click, like I said, it was a high turnover rate. So, but no, as far as BookBub is concerned, I have definitely looked into it. I have not done it yet, mostly because it's hard to get reviews. And for Starliner, that's probably the book that would do best there. But getting reviews for that is like pulling teeth. It's really hard to do. So once I get more reviews and I meet their expectations of BookBub, then definitely I'm going to pursue that.
Are there any marketing strategies that you've been told were a sure thing, only to discover they bombed miserably, and vice versa? Have you heard of any marketing tips that you were told to avoid, yet for the heck of it you tried anyways and found out they work great?
Yes. So the first part of that question was, lead to your next book, lead to your next book, lead to your next book. Didn't do anything. It just didn't do anything. However, asking people for reviews did. Don't know why, but it did. And sending people over to our website did, because once they got there, then they could see all of the different stuff, or to the our author site and so on Amazon. That did, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just I'm poor at doing it. I don't know, but it didn't. It did not translate at all. I think maybe we figured out like 5%, something like that. Went on to the next book from there. Yet when we took that out and we had them go to our website, sales went up a lot. So I don't know why. Maybe that's just me. But I've heard plenty of authors say that works for them wonderfully. Didn't work for us. As far as something that did not expect, or somebody told me, don't bother, it was the whole Twitter thing with the layout of how I did it. I was talking with a couple of other authors, and I was trying to figure out how best to do this. And they said, I told them my strategy on what I was thinking on it, and they were like, it doesn't work. It's not gonna. And like I said, I get probably 20-25% sales come from that. So yeah, I'd like to crack the end of the book thing, but for some reason for me it just doesn't lead to the next sale.
It might just be a little too old school, as somebody's been thinking, in the sense like in the old days, and me being old, keyword, it worked because you waited for a year for another book from that author or whatever. So they would put the insert in there, and you get the first chapter or so, and you'd be just chomping to buy it. And if you got lucky enough to find an author you hadn't read before, and they already had 12 books out, at least for me at that time it worked. But I think in the electronic age it's just not nearly as effective, because there's just too many different places to go. As John pointed out, sending them to a place where there's a whole bunch to pick from, not just the next book, really helped. Because if, let's say, they didn't want to see the next book, now they get 4 or 5 other ones they can choose from. And we're lucky enough that we have a couple different varieties. We have the airplanes, kind of humor ones, and we have more subtle ones that are more, character-driven. And so they can go, well, that one didn't interest me at all, but that sounds interesting. I'll go get this second book, American book, whatever. So it's worked out a lot better for us.
Good deal. You guys have talked about the importance of mailing lists there. So my last question would be that is if you guys wanted to increase your number of subscribers, how do you typically go about getting more people to sign up for your newsletters? I mean, do you put some sort of request in the end of your books? I mean, what do you guys usually do?
So actually, we just did this recently and saw a nice big bump. And what it was is that we took one of our Ononican books. Our Ononican books are typically larger. They're around the near the 300 to 300 plus page books, and but we wanted to write a smaller book, kind of like what we did with the Platoon F, to see how it would do and how what people would think of it. So we put together a book called Bob the Zombie, which I won't get into details because I might offend people. But anyway, so anyhow,
we zombies.
Yeah, so we ended up putting that one up and had it live for a while, and it did fine. It did okay. And then I said, you know what? This is one good thing about Ononican is it's not a sequential series. It's a day in the life type book. So you can go anywhere in the world, pick a particular type of race, character, and say put them in a situation, and then let it go from there. So you don't have to read them in order. You can read them out of order, that kind of a deal. So what we did was we took Bob the Zombie, said it's a smaller one of our books. Let's make it free, and let's put it on our site. And in order to get it, you sign up for the newsletter. We'll give you the copy of this book. Plus, of course, we'll let you know all the good stuff that's coming and all that kind of stuff too, of course. And we noticed a very large bump in the number of signups just by doing that. I think it's been up there now for I think almost a month, maybe a month and a half, something like that. And just from that, we've grown 100%. In the newsletter signups than what we had before. Now that might not sound impressive if I said we only had 10 guys before, but that's not true. No, but we have we've added a little over 100 people just in a month by doing that, and it's been great, for us to do that. Plus, it allows us to get the book out there in somebody's hands who might be like, do I really want to try this? I don't know. And they get a free book, and they can check it out and see if they like our stuff. And if they do, they stick with us. If they don't, then we understand.
Very cool. I'm definitely have to try that. Maybe write a new short story or something. But
Yeah.
All right, that's it for me. Lindsay, would you care to wrap things up?
I would love to. And just one thing I was going to tell you guys that while you were talking earlier, I was thinking of this, that a couple of years ago, Amazon didn't have as many categories as they do have now under like fantasy and science fiction. And then I wrote to them and I said, hey, you guys should add steampunk and some other stuff. And I'm sure I'm the reason why they added it, but I just want to say there's hope. You should definitely, why not send them a note and say, hey, could you guys add comedy or humor under these? So
Well,
actually,
you seem successful at it. Why don't you do it?
Yeah, really.
all right. I have an in. They listen to me. All right. Last
Actually,
question.
that's a great idea. Now we have quite a few books out too, because we can say, look, there is a category. Look at our books. We created a category. There's one already.
Yeah, and then there won't be, and especially in the beginning, there's less competition because nobody knows it's there, the traditional publishers. So, good times. All right. Just kind of to wrap things up, I was wondering, we like to ask this at the end. What do you think is going to be working for marketing, kind of going forward? Is there anything that you see coming or that you plan on trying this year? So
actually, a couple of things. There's something called Publishizer. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Basically, it's kind of like a crowdfunding type situation. And what it's allowing authors to do is basically tell the synopsis of what you're planning to do, your story, put out a cover, and so on, and then get people to promise to pre-order, which is kind of like, you kind of like the ARCs to come in as well, but the concept of at least trying to get pre-orders, and it seems to be pretty cool. A couple of people I know have done it. Depending on the genre that you're in, obviously you're going to either get tons or not tons, but to have that level of pre-order before you even sit down to start writing is pretty cool. You can kind of gauge, is this going to be decent towards it. For us, it might be a little bit more of a challenge simply because of what we write, but I can see it working for a lot of different folks. I actually did some nonfiction stuff, and I've seen some nonfiction authors on that particular site who have done really well with it. And then the second thing is Twitter groups, which is basically a group of authors who get together and not only tweet their own stuff, but they also, and not just retweet your stuff, but they take your stuff and tweet about you. Now I know that this is done in small scale, but this is actually starting to be done in a larger scale with people just kind of getting together. I haven't seen a tool for it yet, but I've heard grumblings that something might be coming of that. And basically the idea is, hey, I'm going to tweet how great your books are. Oh, I read Blade's Edge. It was awesome. Blah blah blah. And then check it out and throw a link there. And then since I have a book linker tag that you've set up for me, you can see who's coming from me when I tweet. So you can kind of gauge, wow, this person's really effective. This person's not so much. And so you can move on. But it's something useful. And then the third thing is, speaking of ARCs, we all know that that's pretty cool, and it's pretty important to try to get those things in there. It's really hard to work around it because you have to try to invite people in, and you got to manage that. And I've heard of a particular site that is planning to do that. They're not ready yet, probably not for another 6 to 9 months. But the idea is that you can sign up as an author and start listing your ARCs and everything else, and then readers can come in and they can say, "Oh, I want to sign up and be interested in what you're doing." But as an author, you can also you can say, "This person did it, and this is what they gave me as far as a review is concerned," and so on. So now, when that reader comes in to look at your book, you'll be able to look at them and say, "You know what? They've signed up for 3 and they never left a review." So you don't have to participate with that particular person, or every time they leave a review, it's like 2 stars. So we all want honest reviews. We don't want to buy reviews and everything else. But at the same time, you can tell if somebody's going to be a pain, and so if that's the case, you'll be able to see ahead of time. Look at their history. You can see, do they actually do it, or are they just here for free books? And so I think that'll be pretty cool too. But again, probably another 6 to 9 months before that hits.
One of the other things that we're dabbled with a little bit, but I haven't really had the time to look into, is some of the books out there. Not so much, at least what I found, the fiction books, but some of the nonfiction books are actually including free, especially the short books, including free audio books with it. So we've been dabbling, since we're already doing kind of the scripts and stuff, trying to maybe get a little better at it, and actually doing a couple of the audio books and including in as a package deal. And I think a lot of people nowadays, with such time constraints, I know when I ride my bicycle to work, I listen to books all the time, because it's just a great way to pass the time as you're riding. And so we've been tinkering a little bit with that. And John did the initial setup, and it was really good actually. We just haven't had the time to get back to it, but I really want to try to do that some too as time goes on.
And the good news about that is, even if our book isn't funny, our horrible acting is.
Will be. Don't let him kid you. He's a pretty good reader, actually, if he's just reading it as an audiobook. Yeah, if we're doing it as a play, not so much. But and female voices is not one of his strong suits.
All right. Well, in the future, we'll look for you guys doing female voices of your books. No, but seriously, I appreciate you guys giving us those tips. And I'm going to check out some of those sites. Well, Publishizer, however you pronounce it. But that sounds interesting, and I'll definitely be looking for the ARC review thing to come about, because, yeah, I send out review copies all the time, and I always ask them to send me the link of the review, because I want to see that they're actually leaving reviews, but I feel kind of, I have to hand do that with every single person, so it's not that convenient. But anyway, last thing, why don't you guys tell us where people can find you, and maybe like which book you think lots of people might want to check out, or what you're working on now?
I'll start with that one, and then John can finish it with the more Platoon F ones. If you're looking for something that's more character-driven and more of an overall story, and in Starliner's case, a lot of books, you'll want to check out either our Nonican series or our Starliner. And then for Platoon F, if you're more into that, just kind of wacky humor, airplane-type humor, stuff like that, in your face, but still fun and still, somewhat character-developed, then our Platoon F series and some of the ones we have coming up. And I'll let John tell you about the one we're about to release.
You can find us either on crimsonmyth.com. Chris doesn't have a website, but we basically piggyback, since we write the majority of our stuff together, is on my site, which is johnplogsdon.com. And this is going to be tough now, because, like I said, I kind of get into the characters whenever I do this. But here we go. Okay, so our next book that's coming out is an Arthurian book that is sure to irritate a lot of people. And it's about King Arthur, who happens to be a cross-dresser. And it's called Queen Arthur. So it's called Queen Arthur and the Nipple Ring of Veiling. So I bet you haven't heard that on your show either. So, there we go. And yeah, that was a rough couple of weeks. I learned a lot about myself.
All right. Well, I will put up the book links on the show notes if anybody wants to check those out. Although that title is probably memorable enough that even people who are out jogging with their dog will remember that.
We definitely try for the title Bob the Zombie, which, as it says, is about a zombie named Bob.
It pays to be memorable. And that's about all we have. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
us. It's been
Thanks
great.
a lot, guys.
Appreciate it.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.